Hello, and welcome back to Chaotic Insights, where I break down the TV show Chaotic. And maybe the TV show isn't the only thing that's chaotic. What? Today we'll be talking about episode 11, Lord of Treachery. Today I'm going to go a little bit out of order. Usually I do analysis and lore and then fun facts. But this episode is so lore heavy that I'm going to incorporate some of that into the analysis section. And they'll still be separate, but they'll be a little mixed and mingled. So, buckle in, prepare for that. But with that, grab a snack, start your laundry, and we'll dive right in. Episode summary. So, we open on hearing leading Kaz to a mysterious place, which turns out to be Kaor's throne room. Then we get the theme song, and Kaor and his team, Takinam and Agitos, ask Kaz to spy on Lord Von Blute at Gothos Tower, because Kaor is going to meet Von Blute there, and they want to know if it'll be civil or if it'll be a trap. But they settle on Kaz gaining info through a chaotic battle. Von Blute versus Kaor at Gothos Tower. Kaz finds an opponent, and Kaz, as Kaor, wins the battle, so Kaz forfeits the match to inform Kaor about his victory. When Kaz returns to the throne room, Kaor has already left for Gothos Tower. Takinum flies Kaz to Gothos Tower with music and battle gear for Kaor, which comes in handy because Lord Von Blute and Kaor are fighting. In the end, Kaor wins, so the underworld leadership is stable. Also, Peyton gets a new scan, and he's able to show it off to his friends, and Kaz also gets to show off his new scan of Von Blute. Analysis. We are delivered a lot of exposition in this episode on like the current affairs of the underworld, right? We get Blue is recruiting rebels in order to attempt an overthrow of Kaor. He's attempting mutiny, right? And Kaor gets an invitation to go to Gothos Tower for like a peace meeting, right? And we get all of this exposition, all of this information alternating from Agitos, the blue guy, and Takinam, right? This alternation keeps the exposition sonically interesting, and it tells us that Kaor is too important to talk, right? He's too important to give information. He's there to lead. But we essentially get this big monologue that's split up between Agitos and Takinam that just it lays out all of the information we need to know about the underworld. And how do they keep that interesting? By alternating. So it doesn't drone on, it doesn't get repetitive. Switching it up, it keeps you engaged a little bit more. And so this is where we're going to incorporate lore into the analysis section because we just need to lay it all out. We get all this lore alternated from Takinam and Agitos about the underworld government structure. We don't really learn about the system, so to speak, as in like how it all works, but we learn a lot of the what, right? So we learn a little bit of like job titles. So we get Kaor's job title is Supreme Ruler of the Underworld. So that's kind of giving autocrat, you know, I don't know about that. And then Lord Von Blute is second in command, is like his job title. And he continues to be, after this episode, why? Nobody knows, right? If I were in charge and Lord Von Blute staged a mutiny against me, I think perhaps he'd be removed from that position. He doesn't need to be second in command, right? But Kaor just like threatens him and moves on with his life. So we are told that Von Blute, he uses his second in command power to recruit rebels for his plans to overthrow Kaor. And we learn that Von Blute has a lot of followers. Like, he has enough to build an army when he needs to. And he has enough to propose to split the underworld in half, right? Von Blute wants the south and Kaor can take the north, right? That's his proposition. We also, in this governmental structure, we learn it's kind of implied that Takinam and Agitos have advisory roles to Kaor, and Von Blue also has two advisory roles, so we have a lot of just political figures in the underworld. Scythia and Krek and Lord Von Blute and Kaor and Agitos and Takinan. Right? All of them are in this governmental structure somehow. And now what does this all mean? I think the political structure is vague enough that it doesn't like allude to a specific moment in history, right? Like Lord Van Blue trying to succeed from this underworld union. It's specific but also vague enough that it can apply to as many situations as you really need it to, but it's also specific in the fact that like this is the underworld and this is what's happening, right? So it's you have like a zoom in, zoom out moment of this is hyper specific to the underworld, but it is applicable to many aspects in real life history that we can draw parallels. And what I think is interesting is we don't really get the why he wants to like succeed from the underworld union. He doesn't explain why he wants to start his own country. It's not like a labor issue. It's not like a rights issue. So the question is like how did he garner enough support to have an army, to have rebels? We don't know, right? They leave that ambiguous, and it implies that Kaor clearly doesn't have unanimous support of the underworld, but he is in charge, right? So maybe keeping Von Blute in power is like political strategy of keeping that demographic appeased, you could say. It's interesting of why we don't get the why, right? Because if it's a labor issue, if it's a right issue, then we would probably align more with Von Blute. But because we don't get that like explicit explanation, it kind of implies that Von Blute is doing it for power's sake, for his own greed and like self-fulfillment, which paints him more in a negative light, right? So like the situation, we get the facts of the situation, but we don't get the whys, and so that's left ambiguous. But we are given a clear perspective as the viewer of whose side we're on. Like we are on Kaor's side as an audience. And that is because we align with the protagonist, Kaz, in this episode. And this is the first time Kaz gets his own episode. He gets his spotlight. He started off the Castle Bodrin episode, and like he'll like start off, he has B plot lines. It's not the first time he's been featured, but this is the first time that Tom has truly been set on the sideline. Like Tom is in this episode, but he's not guiding us through. Kaz is. So because we're following Kaz as the protagonist, and he is such a Kaor fanboy, he fully supports Kaor in whatever he does, we are led to believe as an audience that that is the right side. But like, you know, we're not given the why. So really either side could be the right side. It's left ambiguous. But as an audience, we are given the perspective that Blue is in the wrong. And it's supported by one, the story, but two, how the story is portrayed. For example, like storyboarded and like shot choices, we get a lot of oblique angles on Gothos Tower, which oblique angles are specifically used to be disorienting or make you feel uneasy. Specifically, there is the one that I like noted was there a shot that it starts as an oblique angle and then it rotates and it ends on an oblique angle on Gothos Tower. And right, Gothos Tower is associated with Von Blute. That's his home field, that's his home. He has advantage there, he gets to be invisible, right? And so painting it with this disorienting uneasiness leads the audience to associate those feelings with also Von Blute. Let me reword that. It also makes the audience associate the uneasiness with Von Blute, right? So that we get structural convincing that Von Blute is in the wrong because we're given specific instruction to feel uneasy about him by these shot choices. And also, mutiny, right? He This is an example of Chaotic introducing maybe these complex or inherently political concepts in this make-believe world, right? It gives us more tools in our toolbox. It gives us more sand to play with in our sandbox. And this episode gives us a lot of exposition. It just lays it all out there. And it does tell us a story, but it's the main point of this episode is just to like info dump on this is the political structure of the underworld. And I can't wait to like learn more, to dive deeper into what this means and the effects, right? I can't wait for them to play with these toys that they just built. But also, it gives us such room for headcanon. Like, why do you think Von Blue wants to rebel? Is it because he's greedy and selfish and power hungry? Or is there some underlying current affair in the underworld that we as the audience member are not given, that there's not light being shed on? So, isn't that an interesting perspective? In this episode, because we get all of this information, we get a lot of characterization on Kaor as the real Param figure, right? We learn that he's impatient, and that's directly from hearing tells Kaz he doesn't like waiting, and he also grows impatient and he leaves for Gothos Tower before Kaz is able to come back and complete their plan, right? So we learn that Kaor's impatient. We also get that he's hot-headed. He says, if you want war, I'll give you war. You know, he's ready for battle, he's powerful, he's angry. He he will fight, you know? He's ready for that. But he's also willing to admit when he's wrong. He's open to the advice of his advisors. He trusts Chakinam and her plan. And also, he admits that he's not always the smartest in the room, right? He's a leader, he's a warrior, he's not necessarily the thinker. That's why he has advisors, right? And that's like good leadership because a good leader amplifies the best idea in a room, not their own, right? So it can be their own idea. Sometimes as a leader, your idea is the best. You have all the information to be able to draw good conclusions, right? But a good leader doesn't always come up with the ideas. They just amplify the best one, especially when it's not their own. And so that's kind of what Kaor does. Takinam has this idea of what if we triple cross him or whatever, and Kaor says, let's go with that. That is going to work, and it does. So, and also, he admits when he's wrong when Kaz pulls up and says, you're going to need this. And he has, I think, the spectral viewers in his hand. And Kaor's like, why would I need that? And then there's a fireball. And he goes, I guess it couldn't hurt. But when Kaz is like, you're gonna need this, he like shakes it and there's the cowbell effect. Hilarious. That is comedy. You know, you're gonna need this. Ding-a-ling-a-ling. That is so funny. I love the way that these episodes are scored. One, I just love the music. And two, the like sound effects for comedic sake is like an integral part of the style of this show. And that cowbell just gave me life. It just added years to my life. And every time I see it, I think it will. So Kaor in that moment, he admits that he's wrong, right? We get the cowbell effect, and then he accepts, okay, you're right. I would be helpful if I used the spectral viewers. And we also get a sense that Kaor likes Kaz. Like they have a nice relationship. Maybe it's the flattery. Kaz loves to fangirl. He loves to give Kaor his flowers. And Kaor likes that. He does. But but we can tell that Kaor likes Kaz because one, he came to Kaz for the opportunity in the first place, right? Hearing has a friend. Kaor trusts Hearing for the most part. And he says, I heard you like me, and that's enough. I'm going to trust you, right? So he already has an inclination that of trust towards Kaz, and then for like giving him the opportunity to prove it. But two, after he scares Kaz away, Kaz ports out, and then he like smiles. He gives that little grin, and that grin, I think, is implying Kaor growing fonder of Kaz, right? It shows and demonstrates that Kaz has earned his trust and his liking. Kaor has grown fond of Kaz. In contrast, when Tom meets his hero, it's like immediately combative. He has a negative encounter, whereas Kaz has a positive one. So Tom's initial encounter is based on Maxor's distrust because Reggie, went to Mepedian territory and never came back. Whereas Kaor, this is his first time interacting with a human, and we get the flattery and it's generally positive. So it's an interesting parallel contrast between those two moments and between these two dynamics, right? They both have to earn their hero's trust, but one was given that opportunity and the other one had to earn it. From this contrast, we learn that the overworld was initially more trusting of humans, and that happened about a month earlier, at least, than the underworld, right? The overworld, about a month earlier, gave Reggie the opportunity to be helpful. And now Kaz is being given that opportunity. So we learned that like the overworld was ahead on that trend, but both tribes are going to do it. We get some contrast between Kaor and Von Blue, and I don't know if I want to call them foils, but they are definitely compared and contrasted, right? They so let's do that. So things that are similar. Both of them are leaders in the underworld. They both hold high-ranking positions, and they both appear in trios with the Von Blue Scythia Krek triangle and the Takinam Agitos Kaor triangle, and they both have a human friend that they trust and have aligned themselves with. Kaor gets Kaz, and Von Blue has the convenient, I forget his name, but he's wearing like a green shirt and has black hair. Now the differences are Kaor is much more of a brute force, whereas Blute is more strategic and conniving. Kaor stands on business, whereas Blute has much less of a backbone, so to speak. He proposes, like, instead of, like, if Blute stood on business, he'd be like, I'm taking half of the underworld. See ya. But he doesn't. He creates this plan to propose, what if I had the half of the underworld? Knowing Kaor won't like that and he will potentially get all of the underworld. You know, he doesn't stand on business. He attempts mutiny through deception instead of just doing it. Whereas Kaor is much more of a brute force. He says, you want a war, I'll give you a war. And he wins in like one battle. So we have this good evil dynamic between them of, as an audience, we're meant to align with Kaor as a good force, as a positive force, and Von Blue is this evil conflicting force. And we also have like an insider-outsider dynamic going, whereas Kaor is like the insider to the political system. And even though Von Blue has a role, he is an outsider and he's garnering support in an outside way, trying to take it over. So that's interesting as well. We also have a narrative moment where we learn about Kaor's plan. Well, really, it's Takinam's plan, and we don't hear it in the throne room. Up to this point, all of our exposition has been given in the throne room. They're just laying it all out there, right? But we don't learn about the plan for this episode until we get to Chaotic. And we don't learn about it from Kaz telling his friends, and we don't learn about it from Tom and Sarah telling Peyton. We learn about it through Peyton's perspective. Peyton shows up and he's like, hey, I got a cool card, and they don't listen to him. And he starts to put those puzzle pieces together. So in that moment, we are, Peyton is our stand-in character. We're learning about what the plan is to find a Von Blue and battle him in the drum in order to give information to Kaor. We learn that plan through Peyton's perspective as he figures it out from himself. And this is a clever way of propelling the story forward while also giving them an opportunity to introduce our B plot. Like, the B plot is Peyton wants to show off his card, but he has to wait. And then after waiting, he shows off his card. It's pretty simple, it's pretty minimal, it doesn't take up a whole lot of space, but it's, an opportunity for comedy. This moment where he learns about the plan, it propels the story forward because it gets us out of the throne room and it gets us into Chaotic, switching locations and thereby allowing us to just keep moving forward. Compact and complex storytelling. One thing about Kaz is he does make a fatal mistake in this episode. He is unable to recognize that Param is different from Chaotic. that Param is different than the game. When he goes to help Kaor, when he sets up Kaor for a fair fight in the way that he does for the drome, he's in the underworld and he tells Takinam, these are the things we need, right? He's expecting to have Von Blut to have the same resources and abilities that would happen in a chaotic match in the drome. But in Param, you don't always have a fair fight. Blut has allies. This isn't one-on-one, right? Kaor has Kaz and Takinam, and Von Blut has Scythia to cast music for him, right? And so that alters his expectation of, this isn't like the battle I had. Something's different, something's wrong. And that's, truly it is weird for him to expect, like, I had a battle, the character of Von Blut is going to act the same as a human in a battle versus the actual character that lives in real life. That's not an expectation he should ever have, but he was so swept up in meeting his hero and trying to help, and he was so excited that he just barreled forward. But that's his fatal flaw. That's his hubris, if you will, is that he doesn't stop and think, what if Von Blut is different in, or what if he has different abilities, right? In Param, you can wield 2 battle gear. You can wield 3 battle gear for all you want. You know what I mean? Whereas in the drome, 1 battle gear, 1 music per character, or per creature. It's a whole thing like that. And so, also, why would he expect Blut to have the exact same music at his disposal, right? He could have had anything. He could have had any generic music he wanted. He could have had any underworld music. Whereas in the drome, it was limited to what music was in that player's deck. So, that's his fatal flaw. He doesn't stop and think. He forgets to be rational because he's so swept up in the excitement. And Tom and Sarah try to warn him that something's fishy, but Kaz plows forward. Now, we get an emotional beat from Sarah in this episode that is kind of unexpected and brings an emotional depth to this episode that hasn't really been present for her before. She wants to warn Kaz. She says, be careful. And she's a little worried and she's a little somber. And it gives her a dimension. It's a side of her that we haven't seen, is like the worried and, I don't want to say maternal instinct, but she knows that Kaz isn't thinking. And she's worried for what consequences that might bring him. And she's not accurately able to express that to him, but we get the moment of just her, and she's worried. And that's something I think is worth noting. It's an emotional beat that if they left out, I think this episode would have just a lot less depth. It would be very exposition-y and less narrative arc-y, where as this moment of hesitance from Sarah really fleshes out the story and its consequences. And also, Sarah's sidelined, but she gets that moment, and Peyton is the B plot, Kaz has the A plot. As I was kind of talking about before, this is the first time we see Tom really sidelined, and I like to joke that Kaz is the real hero and Tom is our villain, because Tom Hater, right? But this is the first opportunity that we really get to see Kaz progress into some semblance of a co-lead, right? Once Tom really gets his bearings, he can't stand in for that audience stand-in anymore, is because Tom understands the world, right? And we as an audience, we still need to learn about it in every episode. And so eventually when he understands everything about this world and how to play and that strategy, that's when we kind of get co-leads between Kaz and Tom. Whereas in this beginning here, Tom is very much at the forefront. And this episode is just an opportunity to give Kaz really a moment to shine. And, does he fumble it through not thinking? No. But it's a step in that direction. It's his first time being a lead. We're so proud of him. On to the lore section. So in this episode, we get lore on the underworld location of like the underworld city and how to specifically get to the throne room. It's just an average door on an average street in the underworld city, but you have to turn the secret iron decor on the exterior door, and then there's a second interior door that you have to knock twice on. We learn that's how you get to the throne room. And you kind of wonder if it's just in the middle of the city. How do the people of Param, how do the people of Underworld City not just like know where it is? But maybe they do. But there are safeguards in order to get in there. Moving on, we have the appearance of the crystal ball mineral, if you will. That's how I'm referring to it. It's like the crystal ball mineral or a shard of some kind of ore. It's giving Power Rangers like observe the viewing globe. You look at this rock and it just shows you anything you want to be seen, anything that you want to see. Yes, it shows you anything that you want to see. Kind of like the mirror in Beauty and the Beast, but it makes you wonder, why do we need spies, right? Why do we need stalkers? Blazer, Nauthilax, Jad. If all of these tribes have this spy rock that just lets you could say communicate, it lets you view, it lets you spy, what are the need for actual spies? What are its limitations? Is it distance limited? Like in this episode, they only spy as far as Takinam can fly, right? Takinam flies to Gothos Tower. Kaor views Gothos Tower through this piece. And then Von Blut has one too, and he's spying there. So maybe it's some kind of communication system in the underworld where they both have these. Maybe they have them because they're high up government officials. But it makes you question things. Why are there spies if you can just spy with your eyes through the rock? But also, what great technology or magic or lore? It seems useful for these characters. We also learn about Blut's special ability. He gets invisibility in Gothos Tower, his home, and because of this, we learn more about spectral viewers, of that you can, in the Battledrome, you can have spectral viewers in addition to any other battle gear. And that's not how this card works in the physical game, I believe. But this is an example of differences between the physical game and the chaotic game. My thing is, if you can have spectral viewers and any other battle gear, why not just get 6 scans of a spectral viewer and load them on your deck every single time? Why would you ever have a character not have a spectral viewer if you can just have it on there for free? And that's maybe my strategy thinking of like, I can have this in addition to anything else. So why not have it just in case? You never know if your opponent is going to choose to battle with Mepedians or is going to choose Von Blut. So why not just use the strategy of a just-in-case spectral viewer? That's what I'm saying. Something else we learn about is the trading tables that are present in that great room in Chaotic. You can view records of past matches in the dromes, and so it's a nice information center. I'm kind of comparing these to like if the trading tables are like the library desktop to the scanner's iPhone. Like if the scanner is your iPhone, it gives you maps, it gives you communication, right? But the tables are more like desktop computer of I'm doing research, and it has other capabilities as well. This is something we have to talk about. We just have to talk about. So there are real world rats in the underworld, right? That doesn't spook me. Rats in cities, that's as classic as a rat in a city. You know, and I've always said that. If there's a rat in a city, then there's a rat in the city. But what does spook me is there are green rats in Gothos Tower, specifically in the Battledrome, right? You can put a rat in a city. There's a normal butterfly in that episode with Almar. Like, there's some semblance of real world wildlife running around Param for some reason, which is a creative choice that they made. We'll stand by it. But what's interesting to me is in the Battledrome, there are also rats. There are these green rats in Gothos Tower when Kaz fights his opponent, and it makes you wonder, so are the rats part of the location? When you scan the location, the rats, the swarm of bugs, or like the butterfly, are those all locational aspects because they're present in the drome? It makes you wonder, like, you wouldn't be able to scan and fight as a rat. I don't know if you would want to, because how much can a rat really do? I don't know, they haven't established that. But it seems like a locational marker. There are rats in these cities in Param, and there's rats in these cities in the Drome. Why, like, how do they track, like, are the rats reactive somehow? Like, is it like water? The current's going to change if you're in the water, if you're out of the water in the Drome, right? It's reacting to you. The dirt's going to move. If you step by a rat, is it going to run away? Is it reactive in that way? Or is it like kind of preset like the wind would be in, or the weather? I don't know. It's just an interesting question, and I need to know why rats are locational. When you scan a location, just make sure, keep your eye out for the rats, because they are going to show up in the Drome. And maybe you can use that to your advantage if you know where the rats are, where the rat colonies live in your city. On to fun facts and other notes. So one thing is they don't name Agitos in this episode, I believe. He's just there. He's just a blue lizard dragon guy who has information, and we love that for him. He doesn't get a physical card until the Turn of the Tide set, which more aligns with season 2 in terms of dates and releases and storylines. And so I think that's interesting of that. This is a character that does appear in, like, we're still in what would be the Dawn of Param release cycle in the episodes, but he doesn't get a physical card until much later. But he does have one. Another fun fact is, well, I don't know if this is a fun fact so much. This is an other note. When Kaz forfeits his match, I had this question where I asked myself, if Kaz, his goal is to battle as Von Blue, or battle Von Blue as Kaor at Gothos Tower. That's all he wants to do. Why not do a one-on-one match, right? Why do a 3-on-3 match and then forfeit once you get what you want? Why not just do a one-on-one match? And that, I think that is a valid question from like a character's perspective, but then I answered it, good job me, by this is a very music heavy episode. They use a lot of music in this episode. And so by having a 3-on-3 match, they give the capacity for 3 musics per side. And so it gives them the capacity to take full advantage of the storytelling aspects of what Kaz learns when there's music in play. If he had a one-on-one battle, he would just be able to bring one music, and that would not help him gain the information that he was trying to learn of like a real life Param battle. You know what I mean? And so my note here is that Kaz decides to do a 3-on-3 battle when he doesn't need to, but it gives him that capability in storytelling to use multiple music. And next up, I have to talk about scanners. This is just a note of finally we get to see a scanner ring. Like Sarah calls Kaz, I believe, and he picks up the phone. It rings and he picks up the phone. And I just thought that was noteworthy because in the past, scanners have not rung. They just appeared. You know what I'm talking about. Other notes, I have 2 more. One, I identified a J cut going into the Beauty and the Beast dinner table at Gothos Tower, and a J cut is when you hear the voices before you see the footage, and it's just an editing technique. I don't really have anything to add in terms of analysis, and that's why I put it in the other notes section. It's just an editing technique. So there are J cuts and there are L cuts, and that's based off of like when you're editing where the sound and visuals go. And so this is a J cut because you hear the voices before you see the figures. And it's just an easier way to transition. Not necessarily easier, but it bridges the gap of a transition and it makes it less jarring for your audience. And my final note here is we get a reference to Toxis. Fun! So Kaor says, "Be grateful I don't feed you to Toxis." And this is a fun allusion to a card that we haven't seen appear yet on the show. Toxis's card is like him with his mouth open. Great, wonderful. But we haven't seen Toxis on the show. And so This isn't an instance where they're relying on your past knowledge. This is an instance where they're referencing the physical game, right? If you have a Toxis card, you'll know who he is, but if you don't, you might not. And so I just think that's a fun and interesting illusion of world building. So my final thoughts are, all in all, what an episode. This is definitely a more param-based explanatory episode, but it feels like it has real political stakes, not only heightened by Sarah's concern, but it opens our playbox and it opens our toolbox of what we get to know about Chaotic and how we understand the world. This is, it's not necessarily one of my favorite episodes because I think it does lay down a lot of information, but it makes me excited for how they're going to use that information in the future. Because I do really like when they dive into political aspects of the show and they show the politics of Param. And so I do enjoy how I learned about it, but I think from a narrative perspective, like the battle wasn't the most thrilling to me. I like it's definitely it's a good battle, but like we've had more exciting ones and I don't know. It's just it's a good episode, not my favorite. And we all have opinions like that. With that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Let me know what you think about how the underworld works, and if there's anything else you want to see from me. Bye!